and welcome to the webinar today. I'm delighted to introduce you to, I won't say it's a short topic and a short title, but it's empowering your workforce, harnessing usecure's human risk report to boost cybersecurity. And I'm delighted that today we have our partners usecure and our partners also Unitec. And I'm delighted to welcome you to today's event and webinar. And what we want to do is we want to make this very interactive for you. We would like you to get as much out of this as possible. So this is the event for you. Just a couple of things about housekeeping for the event, and you'll be delighted. I'll only be talking to you for a minute or two. I'm Michael Conway of Renaissance, and we're delighted. We look after usecure in Ireland, and as I say, we work closely with Unitec. Some housekeeping. All attendees are muted for this session. Attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end and during Q&A. Now, the session is being recorded. Unfortunately, there are a few people who are unable to attend and want to see the session, so it is being recorded and to be made available after the event. But please enter any questions that you have into the chat or send them directly to myself. So it's really important, as I said, that this event is designed for you and that you get the most out of it. So it's really, we want you guys to benefit out of this and to get everything you want out of the event. Just let me go through the agenda very briefly as to what is planned for today. We'll kick off, as I said, I've just kicked off and I've done my brief introduction nearly, so you're glad you'll be nearly finished with me now. You'll see me again at Q&A, however. The usecure presentation will be delivered by Nihil from usecure, and that'll go through the usecure product and all of the technologies and what it offers and the type of solution and benefits it can bring you. Unitec and Ian Power from Unitec will be delighted to give you an overview as to what Unitec is doing and where they've seen their business develop, and again their experience working with usecure. Then we'll have the part which is the interactive part for yourselves, which is the Q&A. So please raise them, send them to me during the session, raise them into the chat during the session or whatever, so that we make sure to get hold of all of them. And without any further ado, I'll pass you on to Nihil from usecure to kick off with the usecure presentation. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Good morning to you all. So yeah, again, my name is Nihil. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at usecure. And effectively what we do at usecure is all around end user awareness. So I imagine you've all joined the call today because you're, I suppose, wary about how secure your staff members are when it comes to things like spotting phishing attacks and just generally operating safely online. That is our entire focus as an organization. So over the last 5 years or so, I've spent countless hours with different clients, understanding what their, I guess, vulnerabilities are with their staff members when it comes to cybersecurity, and then putting together projects to then minimize those vulnerabilities. So I guess a good place to start is to give a bit of context to the challenge in which we try to solve. There's a lot of, I guess, concern, a lot of conversation about the human challenge and sort of that being the stereotypical thing of, human beings being the weakest link in your cybersecurity posture. It doesn't have to be that way. We believe it can be quite a simple solution to then eradicate that risk, or at least minimize that risk. But at the same time, the risk does still exist and has done consistently, basically, as long as cybersecurity has been a thing. So to contextualize the risk, 90% of successful data breaches involve human error. So irrespective of, the fact that people spend a lot of time and money, rightly so, on infrastructure, there's still the human element when it comes to these cyber breaches. So it's massively important that we then focus on the scope of how we can then help your staff members to minimize that risk. 36% of breaches involve phishing, which is 11 more than 2021. And those numbers tend to stay quite consistent. Phishing is still the number one or the main route that cyber attackers tend to sort of revert to when it comes to targeting a company. It's the one which tends to make the news the most often, and phishing is massively evolving. In the last couple of years, we've seen it go from things like, general phishing attacks around things like Amazon gift cards and deliveries and that type of thing, to now these type of phishing attacks getting a lot more sophisticated. So phishing is still the number one sort of vector that we try to help organizations out, and the number one vector which you find people are concerned about when it comes to minimizing the human risk in their company. What we're also seeing happen more and more now is that compliance and regulatory bodies are looking at the human challenge. different regulations such as GDPR, ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials Plus. Those key standards and regulations talk about regular user training. They have controls which essentially mandate how you should be helping your staff members. So we're having both the sort of external risk of cyber attackers, but also external auditors having a look and saying, well, we need to be a bit more formal about this. And a lot of these numbers and a lot of these sort of statistics, I appreciate things that you might all be aware of. It's probably a large reason as to why you joined today. But it does still set the scene very nicely to understand that even if you've maybe looked at these stats from a few years ago, it's telling that a lot of these underlying challenges still exist. So it's important that we obviously understand how we can minimize that risk going forward. So I just want to dive a little bit deeper into, in my view, 3 sort of key reasons as to why employees are so at risk. People have known that staff members are a vulnerability. Why are they still that level of vulnerability? Why do we still have this issue when it comes to staff cybersecurity awareness? One of the main ones is the fact that threats are evolving. Cybersecurity is such a fast-changing topic. It's the type of threats that you might experience now with things like QR code phishing. Those weren't really a thing maybe 3-4 years ago. So we're finding that cyber criminals, it's effectively a job. It's a lucrative industry. And what we see now is that more and more cyber attackers are taking the time to be targeted when it comes to building their attacks. The days of sort of mass emails with spelling errors, they're kind of behind us. What we're seeing more and more now from clients who come to us is cyber attackers are being smarter. They're taking the time to build sophisticated attacks. Things like monitoring the dark web is now incredibly common. So, we all use our emails to sign up for different services to operate online, do our day job. Companies get breached every single day. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you could be caught up in those different data breaches without necessarily knowing about it. So the email address that you use to sign up for different services, the password that you've used, even things like security questions, those are the exact type of things which attackers are trying to breach from organizations. And then they'll hold that company to ransomware attacks or sell it to the highest bidder on the dark web. So what we find is attackers then find that personal information on you and then use that to build a more sophisticated attack. Quite commonly, people, even doing this webinar, people like to be visible, people like to spread the message about what they do. That sort of online visibility, though, is effectively often used against an organization. So really big part of this is that, cyber attackers are becoming a lot more targeted and a lot more smarter about how they go about things. Linked with that is the second point, is that a lot of staff members aren't effectively trained on how to behave securely and how to combat different cyber threats. A lot of people spend the vast majority of their day in front of their computer operating online. And what we find is that a lot of organizations still operate on the more traditional approach of training. So maybe some onboarding presentations when somebody joins the organization, maybe an hour-long slide deck on different cybersecurity threats. And that might well be revisited in a year or two, but there's not necessarily that formal reinforcement. There's not really a follow-up. There's not really any measurement to understand whether they've actually engaged with that training. And I think that's part of the reason why we see that those phishing risk numbers, they haven't really decreased consistently over time in terms of, our resilience to these type of cyber threats hasn't really maybe evolved as quickly as people might have thought. I think a large part of that is because the threats have got more sophisticated, but our level of training hasn't sort of aligned and matured in that same sort of speed. So that leads to quite a big discrepancy between what your staff members are aware of and the type of threats they might be facing. And look, it's difficult to spend time building different training courses. It's difficult to keep a track about all the different secure password best practices. It seems to change every sort of 6 months or so. But it's really important that we do have those sort of dedicated training measures in place to obviously help combat that threat. A third point is that a lot of organizations, again, often due to lack of time, don't necessarily have clear policies and processes in place that tell you how your users should act. A nice clear policy that says to them, when you set a new password for a different service, here's the different sort of things that you should be following. You should be setting 3 random words that you aren't using for other sites as your password, or use a password manager to manage your passwords. That lack of process, that lack of policy can often mean that staff members don't really feel that they have that responsibility. They don't really feel like the onus is on them to act securely because their managed service provider or their IT team are taking care of the IT. And obviously that lack of, I guess, onus on them is sometimes what leads to these vulnerabilities. But these 2 points here about evolving threats and lack of training, those, in my experience, are the two sort of key determining factors as to how vulnerable an organization can be. So ultimately, the question then is, how can you transform your employees into an asset when it comes to cybersecurity? How do we flip the narratives that they're not the weakest point, but they're actually an extra layer of security for your organization? And we have coined the term human risk management as the process for which you can then help minimize this risk. Now, human risk management effectively combines multiple different elements, multiple different processes to help make sure that we're monitoring risk and we're then minimizing risk in your employees. So a lot of the points on my last slide might well resonate with yourselves. It might be why you've joined the session. You struggle to train your staff members effectively. The whole idea behind the human risk management approach is that we combine multiple different monitoring and then remediation steps to then help minimize that risk. So there are 4 elements included within the human risk management suite. There are 2 core ones that we see 90%, 95% of clients gravitate towards are the training and the simulated phishing programs. So with the training, I'll go through that in a little bit more detail shortly, but we have bite-sized, personalized training programs, which is designed to figure out for each staff member where their gaps are in cybersecurity and then give you the tools to minimize those gaps. Our simulated phishing tool allows you to replicate the type of attacks that you might be experiencing. Some of you on this call might have had your finance director or your CEO had their email spoofed. Somebody could be impersonating them and sending different phishing attacks to new starters. Things like, could you download these Amazon gift cards and send me the serial codes because we have an incentive going on for our clients next month. Those type of attacks are really common. They're often really effective. And with our simulated phishing tool, you can replicate those threats in real life in a safe environment. So we can take the type of attacks that you're experiencing and see how people would actually respond. It's not a case of trying to trip them up. It's not setting them up to fail. It's saying we need to understand where the vulnerabilities are so we can then educate you. We can then train you up on what to look out for when it comes to a phishing attack. We also offer some dark web monitoring. So like I mentioned in my previous slide, a lot of attacks now will use dark web data to build a profile on you and your staff members. Using UBreach, we can essentially scan and get ahead of the attackers. We can search against your email and tell you which breaches you've been part of. If we then know that your password's been leaked, you can then force a password reset, and all of a sudden that password is now essentially outdated. Because what we find is a lot of staff members, they'll use the same password across different sites. And if they've used their password and email address for Canva, and Canva then got breached, and they're using that same password for your Microsoft Teams channel, all of a sudden that could be a very troubling sort of route for an attacker. So UBreach allows you to get ahead of that threat and show you what data is out there on your staff members. And finally, we have a policy management tool. We know, again, that a lot of people don't have the time to manage their internal documentation. You maybe don't have a policy that talks about how to work remotely safely, how to set up your home network, or what to do if you get a suspicious email, who do you report it to? UPolicy allows you to formalize your documentation. You can send it to your staff members and it will show you when they viewed it and when they've signed it. So if you get audited, if you're going for things like ISO 27001, or if you're in the finance sector or any industry or any organization where a third party might well look at your processes from a security perspective, UPolicy allows you a central hub to then be able to send that documentation and have an audit trail. Now, the key thing about usecure is such a broad-ranging functionality, but the system is designed to be continual and automated. So obviously Unitec have onboarded a lot of clients with usecure. They have the knowledge to be able to set up this program to run automatically for you in the background with automatic reports going to you, telling you how well your company are getting on or what those vulnerabilities are. But the idea, again, is that all of this combines to a comprehensive suite to understand where the gaps are and to minimize them. So the key one that I'm going to go through is the training function, because, again, in my experience, a lot of people have looked into training before. And quite often cybersecurity awareness training is pretty dull. It's quite hard to motivate people to watch a 2-hour presentation on IT security. You've all joined this session because it's a topic that you're obviously interested in, that you're wanting to understand maybe different ways of approaching it. But your finance director, getting them to sit down for an hour to do a training session on IT is pretty tough going. So our approach to training essentially looks at the traditional approach. It looks at some of the issues as to why training maybe isn't being engaged with and being applied, and it flips it on its head. So a more modern approach to help educate people and make sure it's not just numbers on a screen, that we're actually going to help people with their actual behavior. So there's a 3-step process to how we go about our training. The very first thing we want to do is evaluate each person in your company. That's, again, not to trip them up. It's just to say, currently, your current standing in cybersecurity, we need to understand where your gaps are. There's no point in us treating each person exactly the same, because we're talking about human risk. There's a lot of variability with each human being. So in order to make the training as targeted and as tailored as possible, we need to understand each person's own risk profile. So the very first thing that we do is we send every staff member a gap analysis questionnaire. That will ask them questions on things like social media usage, phishing, secure passwords, removable media. The idea is that we then get an understanding in a spider diagram, basically plotting where their own gaps are. What the system will then do is we will then create personalized programs for each user. So if my weakest area was in secure passwords, the first training course I would receive would be on secure passwords. It would then prioritize my next lowest scoring gap analysis topic, and then periodically working through until it gets to my highest topic. The training is spaced out. We send training courses usually once every month, but the training courses comprise of a 3-minute long video and then a quiz at the end. So we're not going to push it too far. We're not going to take your staff members away from their day job. It's a short touch. It will take them 10 minutes to complete in total, but it will have everyday scenarios. It will have animations with recurring characters. So it then is very relatable to them. They're actually going to digest the information and apply that because it's nice and short. But again, a large part of actually changing habits is the importance of reinforcement. Unless we reinforce best practices, people will revert back to their old habits, which are often not necessarily the most secure. So it's really important that we do bite-sized continual reinforcement to actually enact change. And people will actually then act more secure, but importantly, it will just come second nature to them. It will come second nature to them to do the training because it becomes a rhythm, and it will be second nature for them to actually apply what the training is telling them to do. The third thing we'll do is we'll calculate your risk. It's one thing for us to say, we've done training over the last year and, your staff members are doing X percentage of those courses. But it's another thing for us to then say, compared to where you started off, here's what your risk level is like. Here's how your grades compare to the beginning of the program. So again, if you do get audited, if senior management need to see how the program is progressing and your sort of your reduction in risk over time, our calculation of that risk very much clearly shows how your risk score is going to minimize over time. So why does human risk management work better than the traditional approach? So a really big one is that the training will actually stick. We could have the most informative training on earth. If people don't pay attention, it's pointless. So quick, regular, bite-sized training courses are going to maximize their learning without hindering their productivity in their day job. By having all 4 elements included, so security awareness and compliance training, simulated phishing attacks, monitoring the dark web, and sending documentation to your staff members, we have a broad suite. We're going to cover multiple bases. We're going to make this a nice, broad process for your organization, and that will help to transform employee behavior as a result. And also we help to achieve compliance. We regularly get referenced in audits from a security perspective to say it's a very clear, continual program with metrics that show exactly how your staff members are progressing and adapting accordingly. So one thing that I'm always very conscious about when it comes to this type of element is, again, like I understand a lot of you've joined this call because you understand that this type of risk is an issue. It's something which you maybe want to minimize, but don't necessarily know the extent of your risk or the best way to go about minimizing that risk. What we always find is that people, they know they should do more, they know they could do more with their staff members, but having the data to show the extent of your risk is a very, very big turning point. It's one thing to read stats about phishing. It's another to see exactly how your staff members would respond to a phishing attack. So one thing that we can provide through Unitec is a human risk report. Now, this report is designed, it's completely free, and it's designed in a safe environment to understand your organization's risk today. So the risk report has multiple steps to combine different parts of different data points, basically, to understand your risk. The first thing that we'll do is we can scan against your organization's domain. Effectively, what this risk report is going to do is mimic the steps that an attacker will follow. Quite often, the first step that an attacker will do is it will take your organization's domain, and there is software out there where it can find what services you use based on your domain. So people will use that information to maybe understand if you use a service which doesn't have the best security, if there are patches recently released for different services that you used, which you might not have put through, they'll try to exploit that vulnerability. Also, what they could do is try to purchase domains that look similar to yourself. So for example, with unitec.ie, quite a common one would be to purchase a domain where the N in Unitec is changed to an M. It's a really small change, but it's very, very difficult to spot that if it's a Friday afternoon and you're trying to hair through your emails before you finish off for the weekend. So the first step of the domain scan will show you the vulnerabilities that we found based on your own domain. The next thing we'll do is, so we've gone from finding vulnerabilities on the domain, we'll now move to try and find vulnerabilities on your staff members' email addresses. So again, like I mentioned, dark web breaches are quite commonly used as data sources for attackers. We can scan against your staff members' email addresses and find out which breaches your staff members have been part of. We'll then show you which ones are high risk, i.e. ones where a password's been leaked. So again, it gives you an understanding where this data's out there, it's out there today, but now you have visibility on that data, and you can then make sure that data won't be used against your organization. The third step is we can set up a targeted phishing attack. We have some ones which we know we've seen in reality. We've taken them from attacks that we've seen and we've made them available in the system. We can also build custom targeted attacks. If you've experienced different phishing attacks recently, if you've had a staff member report an email to you where it pretended to be your CEO, we can replicate that. That one staff member was very savvy, but we don't know if they were just lucky to get through to that person, and there might be others in the organization who are a bit more vulnerable to that type of attack. So we can set up a targeted phishing attack and again present the results to you. We'll report on who opens the email, we'll report on who clicks the link within the email, and then we'll track who gives away their password as well. So you get a nice step-by-step understanding in a completely safe environment. The fourth thing that the system will do is it will present the findings for you. So it will essentially amalgamate the information and present different summaries and conclusions and remediation steps. So off the back of that report, you have clear steps to take to then minimize your risk going forward. So that, in effect, is the end of the usecure segment of the presentation. I'll just pass over to Ian to cover the Unitec side of things. And thank you for listening.
Hey guys, thanks Nihil, thanks for that. Very, very insightful overview of usecure. I suppose what I'd like to do is basically just introduce Unitec, and kind of I don't want to do any kind of sales thing here. I'm just going to do a quick overview of how Unitec have used usecure over the last number of years, and what we found really works, and some of the things you've got to consider when you're looking at this type of technology. So Unitec are a managed IT service provider. We were established in Clonmel, Tipperary in 2009. Four of us got together and we decided to open up Unitec in 2015. We expanded into South Africa, which is, people often ask why South Africa, and reason being is that there's two directors of Unitec are South African, and one, Louis, decided to move back with his family in 2015. And since 2009 to date, we've just hit over 50 full-time employees between here and South Africa. And what we do, we provide managed IT services, cybersecurity, IT consultancy, telecoms throughout Ireland and South Africa. The businesses, we especially around the small to medium, mid-sized kind of business. In 2021-22, we decided we needed to go for ISO 27001, and we decided if we were doing that, we might as well do 9001. Around 2021, we started using usecure. Initially, we brought it on as a cyber awareness platform for the staff, and that's kind of how we used it. However, as we were going through the whole 27001 element, the EU policy part of usecure turned out to be an ideal platform to push out policies to the staff, and the benefit is the staff can digitally sign them. So we can produce evidence when we're doing audits for ISO 27001 or any kind of audits, data commissioner, so on and so forth. We can produce the reports on staff engagement, staff training policies, so on and so forth. So it's a really powerful tool in that regards. So basically, usecure and how we speak to our clients about this program. So a lot of the times when we initially speak to clients around this platform, you'll get the usual kind of response, which Neil has mentioned. There might be an annual review, there might be an initial onboarding with a new employee where someone has done a little bit of cyber awareness training, and that's it. Maybe there's something that goes on an annual basis, but it's very, very much ad hoc. And the second thing then people kind of have a tendency to think is, well, look, we're a small business, no one's interested in us, we're not going to have a breach. And what I would say there is, look, if you're a business generating revenue, you're a target for these guys because they are out there to stop you trading, because they know you will pay if you've no alternative to get that data back. You can have firewalls, you can have antivirus, you can have XDR, you can have next generation security tools, manage SOC, you name it. But the reality of it is, if these guys really want to get in, there's a good chance they're going to get in, and how they're going to get in is typically through an employee. And it's not going to be an employee's fault. These guys are very, very clever. It is a business. These guys operate, you think in nice shiny buildings and office space. That's what these guys a lot of the time will operate in. They will try and look for the weakest link, i.e., there could be a breach in something like Netflix, and all of a sudden you have staff using their work or office email address and account, the same password in there, and that's why the dark web, that's the impact on the dark web. That data, once it's breached, is put up on the dark web and is available for purchase. It can be searched for, found, and so on. These people typically then go to market, and they'll try and attack the most obvious or the easiest element of a business, which is the user. And it just takes one person to click on something, and it could be by mistake, obviously, but once they click on the wrong thing, these people can get in. And they can get in, and they can hang around and go through the network and see what's there, or they can initially hit an attack. And why this technology is so important in it. First of all, you're helping the staff, you're empowering the staff to a certain degree. It's like we're IT people, so we get this. And even saying that, we use this technology in Unitec, and from time to time, some of our guys are caught, they're tricked into a phishing simulation. And they're IT, they're high-end IT technicians. So you can imagine, someone who's an accountant by trade or something, they're not as skilled, and these attacks are so well crafted and thought out. It just takes a mistake, and you're in. Now, one of the issues is, and you'll see, everyone's going to see this, if anyone's doing cyber insurance or so on, unfortunately had a breach. And a lot of the cyber insurance firms now has a section where you must tick what technologies you have. And when we're speaking to clients, we always going to say, look, there's a load of things here. You're not going to have all of them, but there's a couple of really obvious ones you need to have in place. And cyber awareness, staff training, it's critical. And, spinning the whole way back, the annual kind of review, which isn't really tracked, an onboarding with something that someone done up in a PowerPoint presentation 3 years ago isn't good enough. Because if there's a breach, and the sensitive data has been stolen or got out, you have to report that by law to the Data Protection Commissioner, who might decide to do a desktop audit. They might come out, and one of the initial questions, like they'll always ask the usual: have you got MFA set up on your accounts? Have you got up-to-date operating systems? But then they'll go in: have you got a cyber awareness solution in place? Are you training your staff? Can you prove it? Have you got evidence on this? And that's why the usecure piece is so powerful. That centralized dashboard where you can go in and you can pull reports, you can see what the staff are doing. The training is geared. We do that initial assessment per employee. Then the training is individually itemized towards people's skill gaps. So you could have some people who are very strong with social media, but maybe not so much on email, and they'll score poorly there. Their training will be geared there. Other people, it will be geared towards some other element of the business, but that dashboard is really powerful. Another thing you've got to consider when you're looking at this, you can set it, and forget it. What we found really works is to really think about who should run this. Now, we found HR managers or who deals with staff. It's a great tool for them because they're typically more ingrained into, I'm looking at the policies, I'm doing the HR, I can go into this dashboard, I can see 3 people aren't engaging in the training, and I can take that up for them. And we find when you engage with it at that level, it really takes on a different life to if you just set it and forget it. If you set it and forget it, it does its thing. But I think to truly get the value out of it, you need to have a consideration about who in the business is going to potentially manage this platform. And there's not much management, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's a massive overhead. It's not. It's literally go in, maybe once a month, get the report, go in, have a quick look at it, and you can manually push out an email to people if you want to. You haven't done your training, and reminder, so to speak. And that's pretty much it. So what Unitec will do with our clients is, look, we're happy to have a chat with anyone. We're happy if anyone wants to try that initial report that Nihil was saying there at the end. We're happy to talk to clients about best practice, how to approach it. It's a very straightforward, easy tool to implement. There's very little involved in it. And as I said, the clients who have taken it on from Unitec, they love it. And they've been using it. And once it goes in, we rarely hear anything back from it. And that's pretty much it. There's nothing really else I have to say on it, unless anyone wants to. But I know we're doing a Q&A at the end if anyone wants to ask any questions on it from an IT point of view. But that's pretty much me.
Thank you very much, Ian. It's really interesting. I always I think it's terrific when people actually use a technology themselves and they use it internally for their own uses, and then they find, well, this has really worked well, so let's push it on, so it's it is interesting when you talk about you're rolling out your ISO and everything you're trying to do from an ISO perspective, and that was the initial kickoff and the whole experience. But there's a couple of things from my point of view, looking at that presentation, I think and I'll just jump in there, and then there's a number of questions that come in, and as I say, if anybody else has any questions, please ping them to me as well. But I think the sophistication of attacks is really interesting. They are sophisticated. We see this all the time. When that stat which says 90% of data breaches involved some sort of a human error and a human impact or human involvement, if you like, that's probably a frightening one, because we all talk about technologies, antivirus, firewall, and all those things, and all those are really, really useful. But I mean, at the end of the day, if the human is the risk, well, that's the challenge. So look, anyway, let me get on to some of the questions, and I'll ask maybe Ian and Nihil to throw on the cameras there when we're going to come through some of the questions here at Q&A. But one question here is, how do we make sure staff members actually engage with the training?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I mentioned if you have the most detailed training in the world, it doesn't matter if people don't actually engage with it. So one of the main things that we find is, well, I guess there's 2 things. One of which is communication, and the secondly is keeping the train to be nice and short. So from a communication perspective, it's really important that people know that their engagement is being monitored, not in a sense of like, you crack the whip with them immediately, but a lot of people, if they don't feel like their engagement with the training is going to be monitored or people care about it, they will just sort of pass it off and ignore the email. So it's really important that there's sort of top level communication that says this is really important. You know, senior management have buy-in, that they know that their managers are then being pushed to make sure people are actually going to engage with it. And then the staff members know that if they don't do 2 or 3 training courses, that they're going to get a poke. If you get that process right and that communication right early, people get into a rhythm of doing the training. It also links in with the fact the training needs to be short. So I think our longest training video is about 3.5 minutes. It's really not too intense for people. You know, it's 10 minutes in total to do the video and then do a quiz. So
It's
people
perfect for my attention span. Is that what you're saying, Nihil?
It's designed explicitly for you, Michael. What's the maximum that we can push it? Yeah, so it's true. Everyone's the same. You know, even if you're really interested in IT, you know, it's more than 20 minutes of training on a single thing. You tend to sort of, you need a bit of a change of pace. So we find people get into a habit of doing the training really quickly.
And I guess, and I'm joking aside, but I mean, our experience has been, you know, short and sweet. You know, you can't impact somebody's. I don't know, Ian, have you any experiences in terms of that, like getting people's attention, but give them some quick value in terms of that? So you're on mute there, Ian.
Yeah, it is difficult. Like we've had our own challenges with our own guys getting onto it. I think it has to come from the top down. I think you have to have the buy-in from the top level down. You know, I think it has to be stressed that it's important. People are bombarded with all kinds of things. You know, with email, there's so much going on. There's webinars, there's newsletters, there's stuff to do. Everyone's busy. I think the nice thing about this is, like Nihil said, like it's a 3-minute video. There's no excuse in the world people can't be doing a 3-minute video. It's not very invasive at all in the big scheme of things. I think once people get into the habit of doing it, they just get used to it and they do it. And I think that's why I was saying just a little bit earlier. It's important to have, you know, I think where we've seen the most success is if someone within the business says this is my tool, this is part of my overall. It's not I'm doing usecure and that's my, you know, that's it. I'm a HR manager. I'm responsible for this element of the business, and I understand why this is so important to have the management, to have the director level buy-in. You know, if people aren't doing it, I'm going to remind them they have to do it. And again, the dashboard is so easy. You can quickly go in and you can see who's engaging, who's not engaging. You know, it's not a case of, well, I don't know if I can't tell if people are engaged or not engaged. You can quickly go in and see, you know,
I think one of the things that was mentioned too, it's not about tripping people up and not setting people up to fail. It's about helping people and reducing that risk. There's a question. I'm just conscious of time there, but there's a question here as well, which I'll throw out to either or both, if you like. Has the platform been adapted for Ireland at all?
Yeah. So obviously we're conscious that different territories, different countries have their own types of phishing attacks. So yeah, from working with Renaissance for years and Unitec, we basically have a library of Ireland specific phishing templates. We also have some compliance training that's localized for the EU because in our wisdom, we're not part of it anymore. So we've got things like anti-money laundering training, which is dedicated to the EU as well. So yeah, really important to have with that engagement that we have templates ready to go that are actually things like, I think there's a HSE one in there, which obviously, given their troubles in the past, is quite an interesting one to run.
Yeah, on post HSE, all the traditional ones we're all used to getting, but people fall foul of them all the time, I guess. Yeah. And what's the setup process when configuring the account? That's probably more a concern for a lot of people in terms of how you actually get it going.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I mean, obviously Unitec. I suppose Ian could maybe add to it once I've
yeah. It's not very intrusive at all, really. You know, like it integrates with most people are on a Microsoft 365 or a Google, some kind of cloud email solution. There's very few out there with a fully local on-site Exchange server. Everyone's pretty much in the cloud. We set it up. We can set up integration into 365. We can synchronize the client's emails. This all happens in the background. You know, it doesn't impact the client in any shape or form. We can bypass the scatter. We can impact, we can connect directly into the database, bypassing spam filters. Sometimes the spam filters can catch these phishing emails, so we can bypass all that. And then we typically, what will happen is our guys will engage with the client business. We'll discuss who should be the point of contact and so on and so forth. We go in, we set up the schedule for the anti-spam, the phishing training. We do the dark web piece, and we typically set it up to go. It does its assessment, and it starts the training, and all that kind of happens without any involvement, without any downtime. It can be as light touch as a business wants. It's really one of those tools that's not intrusive at all. It's great, to be honest.
It's not bad to be able to put in something which is targeting the 90% of attacks with little intrusion and little implication in terms of any. You don't have 200 reboots to do. So that sounds terrific. And a question here is: are there any particular types of industries or companies which tend to benefit most?
Well, to be fair, I think it's already been said. I mean, if you're generating revenue, you're a target. So it's the type of thing where basically every modern business, again, most people operate online, basically day in, day out. Or at least have a significant chunk of their staff members doing so. So any company could be attacked, even the smallest ones. You just often don't hear about the smaller ones. What we're finding, though, is that, I think I touched in the presentation, there's a lot of external pressure now, more than we probably have had ever before in this type of thing. So a lot of industries tend to get targeted a little bit more, ones where they maybe think, the attacker maybe thinks that organization will have more personal data that we could try and get at, or they maybe don't have the budget for this type of security, so they're a bit more vulnerable. So healthcare, charities, schools often are quite heavily targeted. And then on the data front, if you're a finance organization, got a lot of obviously very sensitive data in there that you're handling, which is ripe for ransomware. And often those type of companies that are audited as well. So you have external pressures to show what policies you've got in place to prove you're doing training. So those are probably the key ones that tend to sort of come top of the list.
Because certainly from our experience out there throughout Ireland, if you like, we see, as Ian pointed out, pretty much anybody out there can be a target of an attack. But the other type of attack that we've also seen, which is quite interesting, and it relates to everybody, is this can also massively benefit the individual themselves from being personally compromised. And you happen to give away your IBAN or whatever the heck it is because you think somebody's going to send you a whole bunch of money, which unfortunately they're not. That's not the way it works in this life as far as I can see. But the individuals get compromised, and it might not even be the business getting compromised, but now you have an employee who's been compromised, lost a lot of whatever the heck it is, and there's anything that benefits those people even throughout the thing, throughout the whole process, I think is massively beneficial. And we've seen that sort of side benefit as a key benefit as well. But I think just to echo your comment there, Nihil and Ian, it's pretty much every organization in Ireland, every computer user is at risk, because if you have money in your account, they'll want it, whatever the heck it is. Because these bad guys, and it is interesting, we definitely see it. The sophistication of these bad guys is really, really, really strong, and their determination to take your money is very strong. So that's just my sort of side comment on it. They're the questions that we had. We don't have any other questions at this point. Is there anything else perhaps either of you would just like to wrap up with, or Neil, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I think the main sort of messaging is this doesn't have to be a super intrusive or very sort of admin heavy program. It's incredibly important, but that doesn't mean it then has to take up hours of your time each month. The system's been designed to basically understand that you've got tons of different projects on, and it's a simple solution. It takes repetition. It takes a continued program. But getting that set up, allowing that to tick in the background, isn't a massively intrusive thing. And then you find it just becomes part of your standard processes. New starters get enrolled in the program automatically. It just becomes part of your operations, so that you know that it's one less thing to have to be concerned about when it comes to security.
One less thing to worry about, and an
Yeah.
improved security posture. And Ian, from your point of view, taking it forward with any of the people who are online now and may watch the recording later, what should next steps be, and how would they sort of engage with you and your team?
Yeah, I suppose if anyone wants to reach out to myself or Unitec, look, I'm happy to have a chat with anyone, even if it's just to ask a couple of questions offline. I'm happy to take calls from anyone. Just to, they might say, well, look, really, how is it working, or what about this scenario, that scenario? They might want to ask it here. Look, I'm happy to do that. They'll get me at Unitec. My email address, you'll get us if you contact me at ian.power@unitec.ie, or just go to unitec.ie. You'll find me. You can reach out, no problem. Absolutely no problem at all.
Yeah, and you'd be delighted to take them forward, take them through, give them an evaluation on the whole thing. Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, and in the light, we don't have any other questions at the moment. So obviously, Nihil, Ian, you've done a great job explaining things. So listen, thank you very much to everybody, and really appreciate everybody's time at coming on this session. As I say, it will be recorded. So if there's any people in your organization who you believe would benefit from getting this, so you'll get the link to the recording and maybe send it on within your organization. But please reach out to Ian Power at Unitec and Ian's team, and they'd be delighted to take this forward. And many thanks, Nihil. Ian, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.